So I decided to do another video today. It's my day off. I'm off on Tuesdays and Sundays. So Tuesdays are when I spend a great deal of time cleaning the house. It's summer, so I'm still having to cut the grass, and we have about 100-year-old house that has a relatively large lot, meaning we have a pretty big yard, and there's a lot to do out there. A lot of trees, a lot of landscaping that we've done. One side of the house, the yard, is my wife's garden, where she's looking to have sort of a place that's hers. Our cat of 20 years, Lavender, she's a white cat that I got sort of with her together. We were together when it happened, when we were dating, and when she passed away last year, we buried her out under the olive tree. I planted an olive tree when we moved in, and it's got olives for the first time this year, which is, they're really small. They're blueberry size, but that's amazing. We have olives in central Alabama, like 50 miles from Mount Cheaha, the highest point in Alabama, big old mountain. So that's one side. That's got lots of flowering plants, and then there's the backyard, which is mostly grass, pecan trees, magnolias, and our garden plot that I dug out back in 2020 by hand. And then there's the street side of the house, because we live on a corner, and then out what I call sort of the outfield, beyond the stone wall that's in front of our house, is the right of way that is mostly grass and stuff. There's a lot to do. That's all I'm getting at. And in the winter, it's a lot easier to keep up with housework because I don't have to do anything outside. But this time of year, it's a lot more of a challenge, especially with my wife and daughter being back at school. And so Tuesdays, I have to make myself stop and take time and sit down and relax a little bit, because there's a lot to do. In a modern household, one person can't do it all. If you're some kind of trad dude who thinks, well, that's her job, short of managing her own health, there is nothing that is woman's work. There's nothing that you shouldn't be doing to help when you can. Now, again, I've pointed out in the past that it's a give and take that happens at sometimes at an imbalance between two people, and that's just part of a relationship. Every aspect of a relationship. I think the mustache is coming in okay. We got Dragon Con in a couple weeks, and I'm doing Ted Lasso. Got my sweater in last night, and that worked great. So yeah, it's a busy time of year. When we're back in school, before cold weather comes and the grass stops growing and there's no garden to maintain, and no vegetable garden to maintain, and no landscaping the garden to maintain. So there's a lot to do right now, and Tuesdays are kind of busy, but I decided to take a little time to talk about some things that might matter. Maybe they don't. All I can do is put them out there. So since I was young and being in an essentially repressed yet defiant feminist society, you would hear things, kind of the zeitgeist. It gets around even when you're young. You hear it, you understand it, and you think about it, you internalize it. And one of those things is how much the need for men to dominate women, or the need for men to marginalize women in some way, to impose their notions of who women should be on to women, stems from insecurity. A lot of this comes from like the 20th century psychoanalyzing world, and I think that's absolutely true. I don't think it has to be true, and I don't think it is a guarantee that a man is going to be a misogynist or embrace trad culture or bro life or any of that stuff. It's not guaranteed, but I want to talk about some of my insecurities that I grew up with. So this is not anybody's fault, but I'm 5'9". Right now I'm about 200 pounds. My mom, for a good deal of my young life, she's like 5'5", something like that, 5'7", 5'5", I think. She was like 110 pounds and blonde. My dad, who my parents were divorced, so he wasn't around 24/7, but my dad, 6'3" and 185 pounds, perpetually tanned. Like, I was the product of two people who, in the societal expectations of their time and even today, were essentially, just from a purely material perspective, they were, the people you see on TV, kind of, in a way. Now, I've seen the suit my dad got married in to my mom, and he looked like Ron Burgundy. So, like, yikes. I grew up, possibly not always intentionally by the people around me, but with high expectations of appearance. I remember several instances, specifically when I was a child. I was probably 10 or 11 years old, being told by my dad, "Son, you seem to be getting a little chubby." Okay, when you're 10 and 11 years old as a boy, you're just about to, shoot up. So the fact that your body puts on weight and is preparing itself for the absolute need to produce longer, stronger bones and more muscle mass is not weird. I didn't know that as a kid, and it took a long time for me to know and understand that. But that definitely had an effect. And I remember when I was 14, I was a freshman in high school, and I was friends with some guys who lived in the same neighborhood as my grandparents, which was across the street from my high school. So I would usually go to my grandparents in the afternoon, but a lot of times I would go over to these guys' houses. And their dad, who was, I believe, disabled in some way, he was always home. He didn't have to work, or he might have been retired, to be honest. And whichever one, he didn't have to work, so he was always there. And he was an older man. These friends of mine were adopted, so he was white, they were black, and he was from up north, like New Jersey or somewhere. And I was wearing an outfit that I was really proud of, because even by then I kind of started to put clothing together for myself, and this was one of those. And I think I was wearing some sort of button-down shirt under a Carolina blue Argyle pattern sweater vest. This is like 1998, so whatever. And I don't know if I actually had I don't remember if I had any sort of like gut or tummy or whatever, which I do now. Look, I mean, yeah, I'm someone's dad. That's the whole name of my channel. But he said something about, "Looks like you're getting a little tummy there," and he poked me and said something about Pillsbury Doughboy. I weighed 160 pounds, 40 pounds lighter than I am now, and this dude thought that it was appropriate to point that out. Now, bear in mind, this guy was he's an old man who didn't do anything all day, so he was no Adonis. And the fact that I remember it tells you how important at that age it was to me. And there were a lot of comparable instances. Now, I joined the football team. I was in great shape. And then even after that, I, as a teen, every day I would come home and either rollerblade, skateboard, or cycle. And I would do miles and miles of cycling or skating. And I was in really good shape. We also lived in a 3-story house. This is downtown Savannah, Georgia, so that's not like weird. It's not like, oh, you lived in a mansion. And my room was on the 3rd floor, so I did stairs all day, every day when I was home, just to get up my room. And I found a couple of pictures from high school in that time period when I look at it and I'm like, holy crap, I was in great shape. I mean, like, and yet, I know for a fact now as an adult, it took quite a while to realize there was a name for it, that I had body dysmorphia. I, as a teenager, due to environmental factors, people telling me I was fat, I had a distorted view of what I looked like and what I should look like and what the expectations should be for me as a young person. And firstly, the expectation should be healthy. That's all a parent should care about, really, is that they're, and I'll allow that in the past, people thought that someone being a weight different than they were, or what they thought they should be, was accepted as a valid form of concern about someone's health. I'll allow that. The effect it had on me, though, along with a lot of others, was that I worried every single day that I was overweight, that I was unhealthy, that I was not attractive. That was the big one. So that plays into the fact, what I've talked about before, that I had this notion that, well, why would I, ask these girls out around me? I'm not attractive enough to be, for them to be attracted to me, so I'll just be friends with them. And that was untrue, and I know it was untrue because at times girls would express, some form of romantic interest in me, and it made me so uncomfortable. Not because of anything they did, but because I couldn't reconcile the two things in my head, that someone would be attracted to me when I had such a low opinion of myself. And then I think you run into situations where guys are like, well, I'm going to, it's not my fault, so I'm going to make myself attractive. And then if women don't find me attractive, that's their fault. I think a lot of guys go down that path. That's where like a lot of this manosphere nonsense comes from, is the idea that you feel like if you're putting in the work, then you're entitled to women's affection, admiration, yeah, that's it. I guess what I want to say is, look, you're not alone if you feel like you're not the bee's knees right now. You're not alone if you've been treated by people around you in a way that creates problems in how you think about yourself. And you don't have to you don't have to weaponize that against another segment of the population. You can't do that. That's not acceptable behavior. And I am not saying by any means that you're not accountable. There is no excuse for not only bad behavior, but cultivating a mental process where you have a right to someone else's attention, affection, whatever. There is no excuse for that. But I am trying to say that if you've ever been through any similar experience where you were made to feel less than, and then somehow you turned that into a motivation to be better than, and that created a sense of entitlement, that's not okay. But I know where you're coming from. I know why that could happen. I understand. One of my favorite things I kind of thought of about, it might have been Terry Pratchett that informed the notion, but I think I came up with the idea out of whole cloth on my own. And I've used it in many lessons that I've taught publicly in church, which sometimes it goes over great and sometimes it doesn't go over as great. But the lesson is many things are understandable. Even crimes are understandable. That my chestnut that worked really great with one particular older fellow that I loved so much. He's sadly gone, but he's a very clever man. He's an engineer. I said, look, many things are understandable. Sometimes murder is understandable, but it doesn't necessarily make it right. And this guy chuckled because he knew what I meant, which is that there are a lot of times in your life when you might do something that if you look back on it, you can easily say, well, these are the reasons I did it. And under the circumstances at the time, my opinion and my actions were informed by things that are untrue or irrelevant and shouldn't have been my considerations. And just because something is understandable does not make it right. It kind of reminds me of Rosalind Carter, Jimmy Carter's wife. She was asked one time if she had ever considered divorce, and she said, no, but I've considered murder a few times. Okay. That was her standard was, it was a joke, obviously. Hopefully it's obvious that was a joke. But you may not be able to simply overcome what you have going on. It may not be something that you work through. I'm firmly in middle age. I'm 42. And it took a lot of misunderstandings, possibly bad actions, and life experience to even think about this stuff and get to where I am. You don't have to be there at 20 or 25, 15. You're still going through a lot of that stuff, and what you may need is therapy. You may need to talk to someone. I had a vast support network of friends and family that, obviously some things you don't want to talk about with your family. And even that took a lot of years and a lot of time to work through on my own. And you might need therapy. You might just need someone to tell you, hey, look, it's going to be all right. If you can bring yourself to a point of knowing that this moment is not your entire life. This moment is not you necessarily. It doesn't have to be you. Maybe you can work through a lot of it. But what is unacceptable is a continuation and propagation of ideas that if you have done everything you can to be the best you, or whatever mantra people are saying, that you're somehow entitled to the affection of women or the attention of women or the adoration or admiration of women. You're not. I'd like to be that guy, but I've been very blessed to be, with the same woman for a long time. At least in my mind, a long time. My grandparents were married for 64 years before my grandmother died. So I say a long time. It's not that long, I guess, really. But if you need to work on yourself, you don't have to bring other people into it necessarily, but what you cannot do is inflict that work that you need to do onto women. You need to focus on you. When you focus on you and when you have time to grow and change and realize that you live in a vicious world that is not necessarily going to do you all the favors that it can, you'll have the mental space to see other people as people. Maybe you can do that now. That's awesome too. That I'm not saying everybody's like this, but if you find yourself in this place where you are so worried that you are insufficient, that no one will ever love you, or no one will ever care for you, or even just think you're attractive, whatever, reconsider that, please. Reconsider what the world has told you, because the world's lying. You are valuable. Whether you're male, female, doesn't matter. Every single person is valuable. And you may not see it, or you may overvalue yourself in a way that is harmful to others. Either way, whichever one, you are valuable. Knowing your value is tough. And it's a moving scale that never ends, really. I have a terrible neuroses about being worthy of the things that I have. Imposter syndrome. It's a constant thing of like, do I deserve all of these wonderful blessings and gifts? And the answer is not simple all the time. It's complex, but we're humans. We are complex organisms beyond simply the physical, deterministic stuff. We're complex. That's what I'm going to offer for today. Maybe it'll help. Maybe it'll come off as just terrible, but that's my imposter syndrome, just chipping away at the old ego. Hope you all have a good day.